Hi, I'm Dr. Ebony Stone, and this is the Black Woman in the Corner Office. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Black Woman in the Corner Office. I'm your host, Dr. Ebony Stone, and as usual, I am super excited about my guest today. Listen, my guest today has done something that I think many of us dream about. So we're going to get into that. But let me just start by giving her an opportunity to say hello. My guest today is Miss Zara Northover, who is an advocate. She is an Olympian. She is a speaker, and she is just doing the dang thing. So welcome, Zara. How are you?
Thank you, Dr. Ebony, Dr. E. I am so grateful to be here. I don't know if you guys could see it in my group, but I have Dr. Ebony Stone's book, The Power of the Pause. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to speak with your community and just connect.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So we're just going to jump right in, right? Because I am beyond excited. I'm going to tell you a story and then we'll get to it. So when I was a little girl, I shared this story with some friends a couple of weeks ago. When I was a little girl, remember those balls that they would put in your hair, like they twist your hair in ponytails, and there were big balls that kind of sat on your head? Well, my mom did my hair like that, and I, as a little girl, decided that I was going to be a stunt woman. I was going to be extremely athletic, and I decided that I was going to jump off of the top of my bunk bed into the baby bed that for some reason was still up in my room. My little brother was in my room. He was on the bottom bunk at that point, but the bed was still there, and I missed, and I knocked myself out. But I thought I would be a stunt woman, and then later on being like 6 or 7, I decided I wanted to go to the Olympics, something that you have done. So why don't you tell us your story of the journey to the Olympics?
So I always love talking about this because one, it's an opportunity for me to go down the memory lane, also. But so I am a dual citizen, Jamaican and American. You don't know, my family's doing well. So I represented Jamaica in the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing, China. But it was a journey clearly to get to that space. So to start off, I grew up in New York. I currently live in Detroit, Michigan now. I consider myself adopted by the D. I am a D girl, but I did grow up but I grew up in New York, went to high school, elementary school, all the things. It wasn't until probably around 11th grade that I started to actually do the shot put. And, I don't know if, like many of you, like my mom was a single mom. My dad was in my life, but he was in Jamaica. My mom was here. And I had to figure out how are we going to pay for college, right? Because I did take on that responsibility as a child also of like being there for my mom who didn't have a college education. So I utilized sports as an opportunity, as a tool, right? To be able to go places, to do things. So a friend of mine needed a partner for shot put. And I ended up throwing further than any other girl that was out there because I was like, sure, I'll do it. And so then my coach was like, you don't gotta practice, but this is what you're doing, right? And I would win. And then I was like, this is my ticket. So I started to just send out messages to colleges my first year. And I was like, I'm going to be really good and you should give me a full scholarship. So you can imagine these schools are like, who is this girl? She hasn't even made the radar for anything. But it was my junior year and I knew it was late. People normally are doing these things earlier. They're on AAU teams, all the things. So I put together packages because I started getting news clippings and all those things. So eventually I did end up reaching out it came down to 5 schools: Northeastern in Boston, University of Maryland in Maryland, and a couple other schools. But I ended up winning states. I ended up, actually progressing and doing really well in high school to the point where some schools, like lower tier Division I programs, considered it. And so I ended up getting a full scholarship to Northeastern University, and I went in with the same tenacity. I said, Coach, I'm going to nationals my freshman year. And he's like, how about we throw 47 feet? I had only thrown 46 feet first. But I ended up making nationals my first year. I'm sharing all these things because it's that power of manifestation. It's that power of telling yourself what you're going to do regardless of what anybody else believes, and then actually doing it. So I went into college at Northeastern University in 2002. I said I was going to make make it to nationals my first year, which I ended up making it to nationals my first year. At that point, I said I'm going to the Olympics after making it to nationals. So 2004 was that first run. So I ended up going to the Penn Relays in Pennsylvania, doing really well there. And then my mom is Jamaican, I'm Jamaican, and there was a Jamaican tent. So I mind you, I'm not even a Jamaican citizen at this point. So I go into this tent, the food smells really good, and I'm like, I'm Jamaican too. And they're like, you throw shot put? And I was like, yeah. So then they were like, you should come compete at at one of our meets. So that summer I ended up going to their meet. I broke the Jamaican junior national record. 2 weeks later, I became a Jamaican citizen, and I was off to compete in my first international competition as a junior. And the rest honestly became history. Became just the pursuit of competing internationally while I was still in college, representing my team at National Student Athletic Advisory Committee, because I've always been a leader. I was born and I have that innate motivation, self-motivation within me. And I do think a lot
when you reach out to colleges and say, you should consider giving me a full scholarship. And they're like, what?
So there's a funny story with that, because the Clemson University, which is a big time track program, big time school in South Carolina, the coach at the time, my freshman year, came and apologized to me. And she said, I received a packet from you. And, and I remember this story, and she shares this story. She tells me she shares this story all the time too, because I think in that moment, it made me realize as a young kid that adults do listen, right? But she had the courage, right? And to come and say that to me. I apologize because I received your packet. And the whole time we were thinking, who is this girl? And who does she think she is, type thing. Because I wasn't throwing what people would normally get full scholarships for at the time when I sent that message out. But she said, I should have listened, because I was the only freshman to make nationals that year. So if a school would have taken me into consideration, I would have been making nationals for them, right? But that story reminded me of I've got nothing to lose. Why not put myself out there all the time? Because the worst thing somebody could say is nothing. A lot of these places didn't even respond. And some of them wrote back and said no, but some didn't respond at all. But there were a few that did. And I ended up getting the full scholarship. I still ended up making nationals, right? And I still ended up making it to the Olympics. And, and it was a journey to make all of those things. Even Jamaica, I was the American girl on the Jamaican team, right? So then that brings its own battle of trying to get embraced by your own culture, a culture that I've always known because my family's Jamaican. But now, somebody may feel like you're taking their spot, right? So.
Wow, I never even thought about that.
Yeah, newspapers were a true Jamaican wins today, right? Where they're talking about my other, component, the person I'm competing against. And so at times you start to feel things, but as I grew up Christian, and for me, the Bible always brings solace. And I remember one day being in my hotel room at the competition, and I turned the page to Psalm 7, verse 1. And that verse says, "O Lord, my God, in thee do I put my trust." And so that moment I said, God clearly brought me here for a reason, and it was so my dad, God rest his soul, passed away, could see me compete. He's never, I had a relationship with him, even though my mom, raised me as a single mother in the States. It was nice for me to have my siblings and my father, to see me compete and to do something great in the island. It was to the point where he would walk in the banks and said, "Do you know I produced the strongest woman in Jamaica?" And it was such pride. But I'm grateful for those moments and those opportunities. But that's what actually eventually brought me to the Olympics. And the country I did try to get, I was almost blacklisted. They tried to say that the meet I threw, the standard, didn't qualify. So then here I am now reaching out to the U.S. team and saying, "Hey, can you tell them that this meet was, met all the qualifications?" And eventually I did. I advocated my way onto the team. And, I didn't make it to finals. But as you can imagine, when you're advocating, when you're fighting just to get what you already deserve to get, it also is mental wear and tear, physical wear and tear. So it's you're fighting and working 3 times as hard, twice as hard to get the thing that you already deserve to get. So therefore you're kind of depleted once you get to where you're supposed to go. But that's what also allowed me to think like the journey matters just so much, just as much as the destination. And making it to me was like reaching the mountaintop, like, you know, and so I was grateful that I made it. I was grateful that I was able to withstand the journey. And then that is what spearheaded the rest of my life.
Yes, that is absolutely amazing. Listen, there are so many lessons in that. My goodness. And we are what, 10 minutes into the interview, right? Like the first lesson is in absolutely believing in what you can do and what God has for you and not letting anybody tell you no, and just stepping out there and doing it. The second lesson that I hear is to just, even if you are afraid, to do it afraid anyway. And then that third lesson that I hear is just perseverance, right? Because I never even thought, like you saying your parents are from Jamaica, you were born here, and I never understood, right? Because I'm not an Olympian. Unfortunately, my little stunt out of the bunk bed didn't get me to the trials, right? But I know that there are people who compete, live in one place, compete for different countries, and I never knew how that happened. But what I never thought about was how folks might feel in the country that you're competing for, right? I can't imagine what that must have been. So kudos to you for persevering despite what the challenges may have been.
Thank you.
Yes. So you're in college. Were you in college when you actually competed, or walk me through the timing? Had you finished?
So timeline wise, in college, I broke records. I set, I won national, well, I didn't win national championships, but I made it to national championships. I placed accordingly. And then I graduated in 2007, right? So then there was that year gap of what do you do before the next Olympics? And clearly I was pursuing. So I was fortunate enough to get my first job at my institution. I was the program coordinator for alumni relations, as well as I ended up volunteer coaching with our track team. So that allowed me to continue to train and then, so be around the team. And then also be able to like make some money because you're a big girl now. You got to pay bills. You got to pay rent. Like I didn't come out the gates like Usain Bolt and Sonia Richards, where I had Nike deals and everything coming into play. But what you're looking at in my shirt is Moving in Faith. And that's actually my brand. So I'm the founder and CEO of Moving in Faith, which is a global accessory and clothing brand, as well as my speaking services. Everything is under it because it's a global empowerment brand. Because in college, that's what manifested. God just kept telling me, you're on a journey and you're going to use your circle, right? The 6 foot in diameter circle to throw as far as you can, to get your scholarship, to travel the world, to make the Olympics, to do all these things. But this circle is going to be able to allow you to do more things. So with that, I would train, and just to give you a mind, to give you guys a perspective, I would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go and lift. And then I would have work at 8 o'clock, right? 8:30. So I would lift on campus, I would shower, then I would go to work, and then I would work all day. Then I would go to practice after work, right? Whether it's 4:30, 5 o'clock. And then I got to go to the trainers because your body's starting to, when you're doing work full time and you're training full time, it's really a lot on your body. So my days would basically go from 5 in the morning to about at sometimes 9 o'clock at night, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And this is 4 or 5 days a week. So, I'm giving my all in order to pay my bills. So there's a moment where in April of 2008 now, I say I can't, it's all or nothing, so I ended up resigning from my job and had the full support of my institution behind me because they knew what I was, what I was going towards. You pick up freelance work here and there because at that point it's just, what can I do to make sure that the bills are paid, but allow myself to still be able to compete. I'm also trying to advocate to get some NIL and all those things that exist now for student athletes didn't exist back then. So you're trying to make it work. You're doing the best that you can and selling yourself. But I gave it my all, and I ended up throwing the 17. I threw 17.56 in terms of meters. And I needed to throw 17.2 in order to make the team. So I hit the mark that I needed to hit. I go to Jamaica. I win the national championships. And so in 2008, I made that team. And the reason why I was kind of sharing before about I made the team, but then the list came out and I didn't see my name on the list. So you can imagine you do everything you can, you gave up, and I'm like, what is this? Because I knew I hit the standard. I knew everything I was supposed to do, I did. So then I had to go into advocacy mode and reaching out to the team, to the meet that I competed at in the U.S. to tell Jamaica that it was a legitimate meet. And eventually it did work out for me, because it ended up in the newspapers. It ended up a whole spectacle, articles, news, on the news. But if I didn't do it for myself, then who would?
Right? Nobody.
And I would have missed out on an opportunity that's truly once in a lifetime. There still hasn't been 2 million named Olympians since the Olympics has started yet. So it's like I'm truly a part of a brother and sisterhood that is elite, and I hit the epitome of athletics, and that's what I had strove to do.
Yes, I was before our interview, I was talking to my son and I said, I'm so excited because I get to interview an Olympian, and he said, who is it? And so I tell him, he said, what did she do? And I tell him, and he knows that I'm a big fan just of the Olympics. I literally, when the Olympics are on, I don't want to do nothing else. Leave me alone. I'll get my work done and then let me watch. And I don't care what the event is. I don't care who is competing. Track and field really is my favorite. And I'm not just saying that just because you're here. I love the races. My daughter used to run. But I think for me, you can see, even though you don't know the individual stories, you can see the journey in the competition. You can see the work in the competition. And I am always just so proud of everybody there. So I love this space that we're in. I love that I, get to hear the story. But of course you said that was in 2008, right?
2008.
So we are 18 years past that, almost 18, because I guess the Olympics are more summertime.
Yep.
So you get back from the Olympics. Now what?
Yeah. So you get back to the Olympics, and this finds me I was in Boston at the time. The part that I guess the dramatic part of this was I was injured during all of this. So I had a torn meniscus. And so I ended up, doing what I needed to do to compete through the pain, and I want to share this because it's important to hear, because it's not a part of the story that people always share. The people will come with hey, you could do this, a drug, you could do this. People, when they know you're that close to the journey, they'll try to push it. So, morally, it was nope, not doing it. If it's meant to be, it's going to happen regardless. So I competed through the pain, said no to the drugs, said no to the surgery of removing my meniscus, and then, trying to recover quickly to keep doing it, and just competed through the pain. So had surgery when I got back in 2009. And then, when you start that train, you start to say, okay, well, maybe I'm going to try to make the next Olympics. But truthfully, the passion was also starting to die. Because I wanted to study sports management. I wanted to, I wanted to actually be the person putting on an Olympic Games. I'm running an Olympics, being the business side of it. So I was so excited to have witnessed all of that while I was there. And, when I had the opportunity to compete overseas, which I still did over summers, so you'll go and you do a meet and you might win $1,000 here. You'll go into Europe and you may do a couple meets. So that's kind of how athletes, especially the struggling athletes, they try to pick up, the pieces and get the repetitions going. So I came back, my coach was getting sick, the coach that I was working with. So I ended up moving to Arizona. And then eventually that's what brought me to Michigan, because the coach in Arizona took the job at U of M. So 2010, I moved to Michigan for the first time. I am a volunteer coach at University of Michigan. I'm working at Eastern, getting my master's in sports management. But I'm sharing this because, once again, all the things that I spoke are all the things that manifested into reality. So I'm getting my master's in sports management. I'm training at University of Michigan. I'm trying to make the 2012 team. My father now dies. My brother dies. My coach, the coach that I was working with initially, dies. A heavy year, all in 2011, leading up to 2012. My sister's house burns down. So like I take some time to go to Jersey to help her. I'm training out at Princeton University. I'm doing all the things, even though I feel like I'm just being hit with rocks left and right in this tornado to try to make the Olympic team. I was 7 inches off of making the 2012 Olympic team, and I gave it my all. And but that was the birth of me falling in love with Detroit. That was the birth of me saying I could see an Olympic Games in the city of Detroit, Olympic Games coming to the city of Detroit. So what I ended up finding out, though, after graduating with my master's in 2013, that was the start of me applying to this company. I'm talking about 77 applications, Dr. E, like over and over again that I'm applying to this company. Over the span of a year and a half. And
77?
About 77 applications. So there was a documentary done on this too. Because eventually what happened, the first time I got called back, it was like a communications position I had applied for. And, I just read that big girl journal that said you need to be, negotiating, but sometimes negotiations don't work in your favor. So after I negotiated, didn't get that offer after it was offered to me. like it was applying. So I ended up taking a job actually at Lafayette Towers, where I was a leasing manager. That eventually brought me into the city of Detroit. And I went old school, legally blonde, like my pink patent leather shoes, walking into these, somehow sneaking into these buildings downtown with my paper resume. Ended up getting hired. And the only reason why we realized it was like 77, it was dozens of applications, was because I had realized in my head, I kept thinking, they can't connect it all by name. So like once I moved, I changed my address, I changed my number, and then I applied again and ended up with a new recruiter, ended up in a new opportunity, got referred in, and I walked into that interview and I said, I belong here. And the guy was like, I woke up in the morning, I looked in the mirror just like I got ready for the Olympics, and I said, I'm great, I'm going to do great things, and I'm going to tell these people what I'm worth and what I'm capable of doing. So I walked into that interview and I said, my name is Zara, and I belong here. So I got hired started my 8-year journey, 2014 to about 2014 to 2023. I'm going to show everyone I deserve to have been hired the first time, and with a reason to fight and prove myself.
Okay, on fire. There you go. Yeah.
Did just that. So then that's what, started my career off in Detroit and allowed me to do amazing things, buy homes, get involved. I sit on boards for nonprofits, the Detroit Phoenix Center, here that supports homeless youth in the city of Detroit. I was able to, continue to fund my own business, Moving in Faith, getting it trademarked and do things, buy a house, buy my parents a house, right? So I was able to cement myself in the city from the opportunity of really kind of pushing myself in position.
Yeah. So for those of you listening or watching who have never had, I said this on a podcast that I was on, if you've never had an opportunity to come to Detroit, don't believe anything you've heard and get here, because it is intoxicating. I think that the city gets a bad rap, but it's like any other major city. Things happen, right? But it is truly intoxicating. And I was kind of scrolling through your social media, right? And I saw you with Detroit's new mayor, Mary Sheffield, the Honorable Mary Sheffield. And that story you just told just made me think about how when you walk in rooms, you make sure you get to whoever it is you want to get to. I'm like, how did she go to the auto show preview with thousands of people and end up with a picture with the mayor? But it just goes to show you are determined to do what you need to do. And I think just in speaking with you, I think it's just fair to say you do it without being pushy. It's just your energy that people are probably drawn to, right? They just want to be in that energy. So I know you hit some obstacles. Wondering if you want to talk about those obstacles, tell us how you kind of got over them, and maybe what advice you have for others that may be coming up against obstacles, right? So you hit obstacles in your Olympic journey, but now in your career journey, here you are hitting obstacles again. Um, Maybe tell us what the similarities, if there are any, and how you use the past to get through what you went through, in your career.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you for creating the space to have this conversation because I really do think it's important for us to continue to communicate not just the great and what looks good on Instagram, but also the vulnerable, right? And because I think in our vulnerability, that's where our strength comes from. And that when you take that even to athletics, like my weight coach used to always say, you're only as strong as your weakest muscle, your smallest muscle. So if your mind, right, some might say the mind is like, right, the mind is just a small space. Like you got a whole body, and but if your mind is not right, if your fingers aren't good, if you're not getting enough rest, like you're not throwing far, you're not making an Olympic game, right? Like so, it's the same thing when it comes to work, right?
Yes, my bad.
I always tagline. I would say the Olympic athlete changed uniforms and became the corporate athlete. Right. Like I needed to know how to navigate, needed to know how to have the conversations. Who could you trust in the walls of the corporation? Because here, not only is my face now being used, my likeness is being used. And this often happens. There was I forgot the author of it, but it was someone had wrote a thesis and it was like from office pet to office threat. And they talk about how Black women come into corporate positions, and in the beginning, it's like, I want to mentor this young Black girl. She's gonna be amazing. I can make her into a star. Until you do get mentored, you do now have a brain to think, and you then when you see things that aren't right, you will say things, right? Like, and you're not just saying this is wrong, you're saying this is wrong and this is how we can fix it, right? Like here are the suggestions, here are the solutions, here's what's going on. And that's kind of what started to happen with me. And because my face and my likeness was being used, asking me to speak to different teams, I now became this almost token. And then now what happens when that happens is you have other mentees now that want to reach out, and then everyone starts. I mean, we're talking about what, a 30,000, family of companies, like a large company. So, I mean, on any given day, if I speak at a 1,000-member event, I'm getting at least 50, 60, 70 minimum emails after. Like, can we have a one-on-one? Can we meet? Can I, and then you also start to hear stories, their situations about they're not being treated right, and you're like, what? Like, and then so then you're in this unique and vulnerable place of like trying to help someone advocate, understand their worth, but also then if you see something, you got to say something. Then you start to speak up, but when you start to speak up, then you also create a target on your back. And I know that this story is not unique to just Zara Northover, and I think, I know that this story, so on one hand, when you're in a position of influence, you are used, because then you have on one hand the company saying, anything you hear, let us know, right? Like, kind of like they want you out here spying, eavesdropping on people, right? And then on the other hand, they're like, yeah, but we want to know, but we don't want you to do nothing about it. And we don't want you to hold us accountable to do anything about it either, right? Like, so then you're now like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Because the person that they're sharing with me thinks that I'm going to be this either mediator or, kind of, right? Like, so then you kind of create this, it's like chaotic, right? And it's overwhelming. And that I felt like I was in like, what was the name of that movie? Like Outcast, where you're just staring at the screen and your eyes are starting to water. And I'm like, what do I do with all of this? And I made sure I got a therapist. that's what I did first.
Listen, I don't know how many times I have said over the last several years, get a therapist. If you don't do anything else, get a therapist. I want you to continue, but one thing that you said is this story is not unique to Zara, and that is so true. The story is not unique to you. It's not unique to that organization. It's not unique at all, because as Black women, especially in this climate right now, we've got targets on our backs, right? And there are folks that want to help, but there are more folks that don't, right? And there are literal targets on our backs. And I think, so we say it started in 2025 when like 300,000, or that's the number that we hear, right? 300,000 Black women lost their jobs. But it started before 2025. It started, you started hearing the term quiet quitting and that type of thing. The target, I think, I'm sorry?
George Floyd. I think 2020 is when we really started to see it. I mean, it was even happening before then, but it really became vocal around 2020.
Around 20, and it was like the target was there, and then it just kind of grew. And I really love that you said you're in this space, and it becomes overwhelming because you do want to help. You've got people on this side that you want to help. You're trying to help. You're trying to figure out how to help. And this is no matter where you are, even just being in the United States, right? And then you have a system that is not allowing you to help. And so I said a couple episodes ago, when systems fail us, community is where we survive, right? And so I'd love for you to continue your story, but I wonder how you feel about that. When systems are failing, did community come to your aid, or do you feel like you've grown the community since?
So in the beginning, it's you grow. I grew the community as I think my position started to. How do I put this? The system. I'll take it back. The system started to fail, and there was one key thing that broke me, and I remember. I was in DC representing the company, and I remember I was doing really well, connecting, and it was our white VP that was over government and affairs at the time, and she had said, "Well, you would be great. We would love for you to go into this space of the company." She was like, "Wait, what do you do again?" And I don't drink when I go to the events, right? Like, but everybody else will drink. So, and a drunk man's words are a sober man's thoughts. And but I just remember her then saying that. And she said to me, "Anchor," she's like, "Girl, we can't move you until we get another one of you." What do you mean? Like, what is that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so you're in that point, like, because I'm Black and I'm a PC banker and there's not as many of me, like, so I got to like create another one of me before you can consider moving me to somewhere else in the company. Like, and I think that is really where like my mind was like, because I don't think I was thinking about it. I just thought I was working really hard. I was going to be doing all these things. And when the time was right, I was going to have my opportunity to do something else within the company and continue to grow. Right. Look, nobody's thinking about racism. Nobody's thinking about, all those things that are actually underlyingly happening. Right. Like, and but Dr. I think what really broke me is because then I said, okay, I just got to create another one of me, right? Like, so not even thinking about it. I spoke at the next event, and I remember multiple young ladies came up to me and said, like, I basically want to be you. I said, this is going to be a fast track to success. Mentored dozens of mentees. I remember a leader even said, Zara has more mentees than some of the leaders in this company. And and eventually and when I saw how, and I said to her though, and this is where I think I started to also break inside, because imagine telling somebody you're mentoring, like, this is going to be a fast track to success, but don't be surprised that the more you succeed, the more you'll start to gain a target on your back. The fact that was part of the conversation that I was having, I think was subliminally there, but I wasn't understanding completely in that moment. And I saw it in real time. This girl was killing it, writing loans and now growing fast. And then all of a sudden she's supposed to get promoted and she doesn't get promoted. And then she calls me, of course, crying because she's like, the two white guys that have all these issues, they got promoted, and then they're telling me like they don't think I'm ready yet. And I'm like, oh no. And at this point, I ended up on leave because mentally I broke, like, and so when she tells me this on my way, when I come back from leave, I was like, nope, you're going to write HR. You're going to tell them, right? Like, you're going to advocate for yourself. And of course, in that moment when she advocated, she was like, she sees me. So like, the target goes even bigger now on my back.
Right.
And, but she ended up she got her promotion. She was retroactively paid because they were wrong. Yeah. They were wrong.
How? So we see this over and over, and I have my opinions, but I'm curious as to yours. For someone who's watching and they're saying, look, I've seen this happen. I've been passed over time and time again by someone less qualified, someone with more issues. What do you do? How do you navigate those waters?
What worked and what I will swear by, I think worked for her, right? No one will. We can't really ever know because they're not going to tell me on the back end, girl, you was right? Like they're never going to admit that. A jury is going to have to admit that, right? Like, but what happened was she had community. So how you asked me, like I didn't have the community when I needed the community. But now, because I went through that position, I saw what was happening. I was the mentor in this situation. I was able to be the community. And then because she chose, even though I would have been like, don't CC me, but because she did CC me, now somebody else saw. You can't really be unaccountable when somebody else is witnessing whatever, all the things that are happening. So they ended up having to do right by her, because if not, it was going to be a problem.
Absolutely. And, I love that. I love that for you saying that to her. I love that for her doing that. And I am big. Anybody will tell you I'm big on documentation. I have stacks and stacks and stacks of notebooks and journals. I keep one with me when I'm working. No matter where I'm working, I keep it with me. I can tell you where I was, on what day, at what time, who was in what place, what they did, what we talked about, the whole nine, right? So if I know, and I often write my reflections as well, right? So I think that's important, because oftentimes we will say, I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, but we have no proof of it. So
I mean, that is the key, is documentation. So I'm still working at the seeing the business. And remember, once you bring back an influence, doesn't mean that I wasn't an influence even when I was gone. They released a documentary, a 10-minute documentary that the company invested time and resources into, right? To motivate, to get more minorities into positions and to join the company. And so I was getting messages even when I was on leave. I'm also messaging leaders like, hey, I'm forwarding this your way. This person is saying X, Y, and Z. We need to be there. So I'm being this liaison. So then I say, you can't put me in this position, want me to be an influence, but then basically kind of grade me or compare me to my peers, right? When it comes to doing a review, when I'm doing way more than everybody else, right? Like so I just need to be in a position where I can do this. So, and I think that's the hardest part sometimes, when you find yourself kind of warped into being a token for it, right? Like for an influence, that's a better word, an influence, right? Like for a company in the current position that you're in without any other titles. And that's where you have to be careful, because the scope of work starts to change. But then if you slip here, even though you're doing all these other things, then this now becomes the thing that if they want to hold it against you, right? If they want to hold it against you, that's when they will. They're not going to talk about everything else you're doing. They're just going to say, hey, you forgot to make a phone call, or hey, they're not going to remember the fact that you just got on a plane to go to, an HBCU to speak, or DC to represent the company, or you were answering 50 emails because you just did a speaking engagement that you were asked to do for free, right? Like not for more money, or a photo shoot, like, right? Like they're not going to talk about those things. So ultimately that young lady got her everything rectified, still was dealing with some, targeting stuff. And then I had to bring forth, I'm getting people now coming to tell me that they were dealing with harassment type stuff and all these. So now I'm really in a spot of just like, hey guys, I think this is a solution. This is how we could create a win-win. We need to anti-bias conversation. So maybe I should be in the DEI space. Maybe I should, right? Like I could help. And that's where I, was pushback. I did get pushed, but just like when you're dealing with tons of people, I always remind people, you may get 15 people that say no, but eventually you might find that one leader that's like, you know what, come on my team, right? Yeah. Like, and I think that was kind of that saving grace where like, hey, we have a position over here, strategy and innovation. I love your work. So, and they don't really know of all this other stuff going on, right? Like, so you kind of make that move. But then in that position now, I'm really opened up to even more stuff that's happening, right? Because it was a small elite team, basically looking at all of the things of what can make this company better in all different areas. So, and that's where things start to really hit the fan for me. Like, you start thinking you're just doing the work. And they're like, oh no, we didn't think that you were going to think. We didn't think that you were going to come to the meeting and actually contribute. We just wanted your name to be on the list. We wanted to show we had diversity, right? Like, and I'm like, hey, you said you needed more diversity. You said you were looking for the architect, a Black person that's an architect, that's an entrepreneurial background, marketing, this unicorn. I found the unicorn because I got friends that are also educated. And then you don't give them an interview? Like, what does that even? So then I think that's where, because now I become this person, right? My leader at the time, who's no longer with the company, said it best. He said, Zara, you're trying to raise your hand and say, here's a red flag. This is how we could fix it. But yet the company sees me as the red flag instead. Because I know what's actually happening and trying to be a middle person to fix it.
It's interesting. You used a term that I've used before. Some folks I know have used, like, hey, you're looking for the unicorn. I know some other unicorns. Well, here's the reality. We're not unicorns. Like, people want diversity. They want to see diversity, like you said. But when you see it, what comes with it is diversity of thought, right? And so you're not going to get, I'm not just going to repeat to you. I will tell anybody, don't hire me if you want me to just repeat to you what you think. You don't need me. What am I here for? We're in unicorns in the sense that we are in the rooms as unicorns, but we're not, because there are communities of us. Like, we're the most educated demographic of the population. Like, if you bring us in the room, you're gonna get the work done, but you're also gonna get the thought, and you're gonna get told what ain't right. We're gonna tell you, So your boss tells you, like, hey, you're trying to wave the red flag, but you have become the red flag. So, like, what do you do with that, and how do you end up exiting the organization?
And then that leads to where I think if you follow my social media or see, that's where we are now. So here I'm moving along, just doing my job still, right? Like, and then I get that meeting that you didn't put on the calendar, that you thought you was meeting one person, then all of a sudden HR is in the meeting, and then you're like on Zoom, because remember, not only was it George Floyd and everything going on around that, it was also the pandemic, right? Like, so now on Zoom, then I enter this meeting and I see the chief risk officer and I see the VP of HR. So I'm like, where's my TRS person? Where's my leader? Like, how do we just escalate? I thought I was walking in to talk about the future of purchase, and now you guys are talking about I'm out here creating noise. What does that even mean? What do you mean I'm creating noise? Oh, is this about the letter that I sent where I said, hey, you said we wanted more diversity, equity, inclusion, and I referred people, we're not calling them back, right? Like, or is this the time where I said that we raise interest rates and we could unintentionally be adding to the racial divide? And then that's when I struck a chord. And at that moment, actually, I was threatened. That's when the chief risk officer said, Zara, if we decide as a company we're going to raise rates, we're going to raise rates. And if you continue down this path, it's not going to end well for you.
Okay.
HR there, I'm there, just how you was looking is kind of how I'm looking. But I think at that moment, you also get, I had already been through this years before, the Create Another One of Me. I think it was all now really starting to make sense. I also went through Netflix watching the Underground Railroad, Sandra Bland, like Trayvon Martin. So now I'm like, oh, I see what's really happening here. I was like, so this sounds like retaliation to me, right? Like, you know, this sounds like you have a problem with me, right, saying certain things. And then I was like, how about we talk about the future of purchase, right? Like, you know, and then we go back and forth. And that was the beginning of the end, right? Like, you know, like for me, basically at the company, and it drove me crazy because, you know, I'll have to mind me 1 second, because actually 2 weeks after being threatened, I get this in the mail. And it's a gorilla with a fortune teller on the card. And inside the card says, Zara, I see a great year in your future, or bananas. It's unclear. Happy birthday anyway. So seeing this as a Black woman, after you done threatened me already and said, if you continue down this path, it won't end well for you, then I see a great year. So basically you're saying, if I don't shut up and dribble, right, you're going to have some problems.
So I'm curious. I know, I got to ask the question, right? Do you think those cards went out to everybody, or?
So yeah, so they go out, and they don't go out to the whole company, right? I think they do them in increments, right? Like, so it'll be like whoever has a birthday the first week in March, right? Like we'll get these cards sent to them, but you still have to select. So who's selected?
You're right.
Like, and if I'm going to retaliate or do something, wouldn't you do it in a way where you also have a fail safe?
Absolutely.
Because everybody else wasn't threatened.
Right. Absolutely. I just wanted to throw that out there because I think oftentimes things are done in just that way, right? To kind of cover your behind, if you will.
But with it, what I thought was interesting was then you start also getting emails from other people that are trying to appease the situation, right? Like, oh, well, I had a dog on my card. Does that mean they're calling me a bitch? Like, and I mean, like, it's like, come on now. Like, were you threatened 2 weeks before, right? Like that really changes the narrative when you put the whole context together, right? Absolutely. Like, you know, like, and then you get but it wasn't just me though. There were other Black women that did get the card and they did feel the same way and they weren't threatened 2 weeks before, right? Like, so either way, it was an insensitive card to be sending out. And absolutely. There's checks and balances to think about that stuff, right? Like, so in my situation, I advocated for myself. I saw the signs for what they were, because that's also something important. I want people to realize how you feel and how you receive something is by no means somebody else should be able to tell you, well, that's not how it's supposed to be, or it's still what I felt and my situation and what my experience was based off of your actions as a company, and so with that, I still was at the company. So I filed the complaint. I said, we got to figure this out because I loved the company. I loved where I was working. I moved. I didn't apply 77 times just to not be there no more. I didn't rise as fast as I could. And then all of a sudden speak at engagements and have a video and do all these things to just all of a sudden become a noise and be a problem. Right. And I think that's it's always interesting when you start seeing what other people's narratives start to try to become when they're trying to do what they need to do. I mean, at that, HR is going to do what they do, and that's protect the company. Right. Like, and at some point you got to realize you got to protect yourself. Right. Like, so, and holding somebody accountable, that's the putting it on paper. Like you said, Dr. E, it's making sure that you document. Because if everyone that had an issue documented, it probably wouldn't be the same issue taking place, right? Like they would. It would have to be. I ended up on medical leave because I speak calmly now because it's been years, right, that I've been dealing with it. But in the moment, can you imagine? It was tears flowing. It was my life was in shambles. I'm like, what is happening? Like, this is a nightmare that I'm experiencing. So, my therapist took me out on a mental health, leave. And, I realized I have to do something about it. So I filed a suit. I filed a claim. I couldn't get into the EEOC because the EEOC was swarmed. Because that's why I said that was the start during 2020 is because it was a change in administration. People started really being bold and showing their true colors, questioning DEI, questioning all things. So more complaints started to go in. And so I remember filing a complaint, getting a lawsuit, and then going down that path. And when you say about community, it's tough because when one company owns most of a city, then people start being like, girl, I love you. And I know somebody that went through it just like you, but I don't know what to tell you, right? Like so like you're kind of in.
I need my job. I'm sorry, I can't help you.
and it's like, and it's tough because it's like on one hand you get it, and then the other hand you're lonely. But then for me it was like, man, I've had to advocate my whole entire life, and clearly God even gave me a brand called Moving in Faith. So what testimony do you get without a test? Right. And I said, like, and that's when I said, like, I'm not signing an NDA, right? Because of course, especially with this card, they was trying to offer a severance. They was trying to offer settlement. Like, and I said, well, I'm not signing away my silence though, because the thing that it made me start thinking about is when I graduated from college, did I go through a course where they tell you what harassment, what diversity, discrimination, all these things are, and they tell you what to do if it happens? They don't. They don't tell you. They tell you what it is. They even tell you what it is when you start a job, but they don't tell you exactly what you're supposed to do, because HR is not the first place you go. You either go to your mentor at another company or you go to an employment lawyer, right? Yeah. Say the situation so you know what your options are and how to approach HR, right? Like, and I wanted to make sure with this situation that I'm going to be able to use my voice and my experience to empower and educate people on the process. So therefore, hopefully policies just change and they don't continue to do this. And what I can say is when I went back to work, because I did go back to work, despite all of this stuff happening, I went right back to work, and they did. I was met with a $20,000 pay cut. I was met with changing dissolving my position. And all of a sudden I got to go back to being a new hire. And I still showed up every day. Every day with a smile on my face, with $15 from six figures to $15 an hour. And I was like, you guys are going to fire it, right? You're going to let me go. Like, right. Like, so at this stage, I understood this. If this is what being in the game is, like, you chose a former Olympian to discriminate and retaliate against. And I was going to learn the law to the point of having to represent myself. And that now brings us into 2025, where we are today with the 1,250 people that have signed a petition as I stand before the Michigan Supreme Court as a pro se litigant representing myself, in a retaliation claim that is 18 weeks in, and we're waiting for a response. And I say that with pride and proudly because there's not too many pro se people that are self-representing that make it this far. There's not too many people that even understand this terminology, understand what to do. But, by the grace of ChatGPT, AI, and Jesus, we figured it out. And we wrote our briefs, we filed our motions, and we showed up in court. And, and it's because this is bigger than me. This is bigger.
Yeah. So you say you're 18 weeks in waiting on a response. When you get the response, is that like the response, or are there other steps that have to happen?
Yeah, so at the Michigan Supreme Court level, we're here basically because a judge saw this and said, oh, we're going to dismiss this, right? Like we're not even going to allow this to go through discovery and do all the things. So I'm before the Supreme Court basically kind of saying, hey, the decisions that were made were wrong because the law says I'm supposed to go through discovery. And these are the reasons why, right? The procedure was wrong to get my day in court. So with a win, or what would be considered a win or victory, by having the courts, the justices, so there's 7 justices that sit on the Supreme Court, and at least 4 of them either have to say yes or 4 of them say no, right? And then it's either denied or it moves forward. If it's remanded back or sent back to the trial court, what happens is I get my day in court, right? Like, I get to go bring my discovery, my evidence, and plead my case of what happened. and go through the process, or if they deny it, it's still not over. And that's the part that if you're not educated, you don't know. If they deny it, really because over 2,000 cases are submitted on the Supreme Court level, and less than 3% typically actually make it through. Luckily, like usually the if something's not really important, like I would say, if they consider it like an easy denial, it's usually denied in the first 2 to 8 weeks. So I do feel blessed that at least they're deliberating, they're talking, and they're really thinking this through. They're looking at all the material, which is why it's taking so long, because they're not going to keep something that they planned on denying. So easily. So it could be and if they do deny it, then what will happen is if at least one or two of those justices say, you know what, I don't agree with everybody else, and this is a reason why, it's called a dissent. And with that dissent, then now I could take my case and go to the U.S. Supreme Court on the federal. That's where Justice Kenji and the 14 U.S. Supreme Courts are, and I will take it to the top as far as you could go. If you haven't seen a theme, Olympics is as far as you could go. This is now as far as you could go. So I will be proceeding until I can't anymore, because I do believe in this. And what I hope happens from it, at the end of the day, I just hope that they do right for everybody else that's coming behind me, right? Like you messed up. So just do right by everybody else now. And then for everybody else, they at least will know their rights, understand what you can and cannot do, that you will hold people accountable before they could even do wrong by you, right? So this path has purpose. And I think that's the running theme in my life, is that whatever it is that I'm engaging or encountering, there's a purpose in the journey in itself. And I just have to be ready to pivot. Like we were talking about before this, right? Like I went through the pause, right? I had my moment of pause. And right, and then now it's the pivot. So what are we doing about it? And then once we figure it out, then we got to proceed.
Let's proceed and persevere. So I don't know if they picked the wrong one or the right one, right? But it is inspiring to watch you say, no, I'm gonna take it as far as I can take it. And it is not because like you said, it is bigger than you, right? It's not just one issue. It's not just one person. It is not, dare I say, just one company, right? It is about fighting the fight for Black women. And even those who maybe have not experienced it yet, because it's coming, right? Fighting that fight for them, fighting the fight for the generations to come behind us, showing people that you absolutely can fight the fight, showing people that sometimes fighting the fight, it ain't fun, right? When you go from 6 figures to $15 an hour, that ain't fun. I got bills to pay. I've built my life around my salary, but I'm going to fight this fight. I'm in the game, and I'm going to play this game, and I'm going to win. And I just
have you been to the African American Museum in DC?
I have. Yep. I actually was there
when you first walk in, that's the sign that says, "We are our ancestors' wildest dreams."
Absolutely.
Like, that is something I tell myself over and over again, right? Because they fought so hard for us to have the right to speak up, to have freedom, to be treated fairly and equally and equitably. And I just can't see myself not honoring that. So it is bigger than me, from the situation that took place, from knowing the impact that I could have by standing up and showing people that it's possible. Because some people just didn't even know this was possible, because we don't learn this. Nobody's taught what to do and how to do it.
Correct. I wouldn't have known. I would have had no idea. So I personally just want to thank you on behalf of women that you know were suffering, women that you didn't know were suffering, women inside and outside of that organization, inside and outside of Detroit, inside and outside of the country. Just thank you for the fight. And thank you for showing us that the fight can be fought and that we can win, because I will say this, I don't care what the Michigan Supreme Court, what their decision is, you have won and will continue to win, because people are seeing, people understand, people know. So it is a win no matter what. no matter
Thank
what.
you so much. Thank you. I
Absolutely.
appreciate you. I love you. And I love everybody that's watching. I mean, we're not alone on this journey. And I think when we realize how powerful we are truly when we come together, that's when change will happen. I understand that we are in a system that makes us feel like we have no choice, but we really do. And until we actually start making the hard choice, that's when we'll really start to see the system start to break. You
Absolutely.
know, it's hard to make the hard choice. It's not easy, but at some point you do have to trust the process and keep moving in faith.
Absolutely. So listen, I got two questions for you.
All right.
Well, again, thank you for sharing that just powerful story. Um, you've shared a tremendous amount. Is there anything, first question is there anything that you want to share that maybe we haven't touched on, or you're just like, man, I meant to say that and I didn't?
No, I think we this was a great podcast. I think it was a great conversation. It flowed, and you know, I'm accessible. I'm on all social medias. I keep everybody updated from TikTok to Instagram. All things moving in faith or Zara Northover. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out because there is obviously so much that happens in between. But I think we captured everything.
Yes, I love that. Okay, so my favorite question, and everybody knows what's coming, and that is if someone looks and says, listen, we cannot leave this story untold. We have to turn this story into a movie. And they come and they say, Zara, we want to make your life a movie. What would it be called? And if you know, who would play Zara Northover in the movie?
So the story would be called Beyond the Circle.
Beyond
And
the Circle.
and the reason for it is because the coach that I told you that was like an uncle to me that passed away, he would always say that your impact is beyond the circle, right? Like, so bigger than the Olympics, which are circles, right? Like, you know, like all together, and the shot put circle that brought me around the world. And, you know, at the end of the day, when we talk about cycles, it's in the circle, but in order to break a circle or break a cycle, you got to go beyond it. So I think that my movie would be called Beyond the Circle.
It's powerful. Do you know who would play you?
So it's I think it's Natasha Rothwell. She's the character, the heavier character in Insecure with Issa Rae.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that would be so. She was kind of lighthearted, but always like if you kind of tried to mess with one of her girls, she was like, "Let me show up and tell you about." Like, yeah, like this is what has to happen, right? Like, and I think she would play a great Sarah. I think it's Natasha Rothwell.
I love that. So listen, Natasha Rockwell.
Ready.
If there is anybody who decides they want to move in their life and make it happen, it's her. So I wouldn't be surprised if I saw your life on the screen one day at all. So listen, thank you so much for being here. I absolutely enjoyed the conversation. I have been poured into because of it, and I just appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
So,
for having me.
absolutely. So you guys know what to do. Go out there and keep spreading that Black girl magic on everything you do, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.